Can anybody can anybody let me know about what they consider networking? We are primarily focusing on employment tonight, but when you're working on job searching, your network really begins everywhere you are. You want to let everybody know that you're looking for work.
Yeah, so why don't we do like a raise hand? Um, could can everybody answer this question? I suppose you've heard the term networking, you're here. But have you ever done it? Have you ever done networking before? Elena, is anybody raising their hand?
Yes, we have four people raising their hand.
Okay. So, all right. Any more, or is that sort of where we are?
That's about where we are.
All right. All right. So that's excellent. So if you haven't, even if you've done it, we're so glad you're here because I think we're gonna just talk about sort of what it is and how, as Lori said, you can use it as part of your job search and certainly as part of your career development. Um, so do you want me? So today, we are going to begin, as I said, with sort of a definition of networking, and we're going to sort of sh share some ideas on why networking, and we're going to talk a little bit more about sort of how to do it, and um, and of course. We invite you at any point you have a question to raise your hand. Um, so, Lori,
Mhm.
uh, so what is like when you hear the word networking, what do you think about?
Well, I have learned over the years that networking is really about connecting with other people and letting people know briefly about myself
Right, right. So,
and developing a real personal connection, not just like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. It's going a little deeper than that.
right. So I love the fact that they talk about networking being a way to build a relationship, right? As you said, it's not just uh, a chance to sort of tell people all about you. That it really is supposed to be, so networking when approached sort of with this concept of it being building a relationship and sort of with being focused on openness to learn and to sort of um, to learn and to give, then I think networking becomes a chance to exchange ideas, information, and support as you work. So I have a confession to make, and that is that when I was much younger and just starting out, sort of in the professional world, I made so many mistakes networking because I was really focused on, oh my gosh, I need to meet with this person because somebody else told me that this person can help me with my career. And so I was always ready. I had my resume, I had my questions, and I had my pitch sort of all about who I was, and I didn't understand that it was like a two-sided sort of interaction, right? That there was certainly what I was interested in, but also a chance to also learn from the other person about the other person and sort of their path and their interests and how they were sort of where they were at the time. Um, as I said, I was so often like really focused on, you know, asking about work. And what I found was that those particular conversations tended to be really short and not, and I left feeling not like that I gained anything at all. Um, and so one of my really best networking experiences was meeting with someone who had retired from a company where I thought I wanted to work. And we met for lunch, as I said, and we were both like pleasantly surprised that we had actually watched the same TV show the night before. And so we spent a lot of time talking about the TV show. And the nice thing about that I found for myself was that I sort of relaxed and I wasn't so like eager to prove that I was qualified and that my blindness wasn't a real barrier to work. And we had a really fantastic conversation. And although I left, I didn't get my contacts or follow up or anything like that, um, the person I actually did stay in touch. And then later on, they emailed me some names of people they thought I might find helpful in my job search. So, Lori, what about you? Have you had different or similar types of experiences?
I have to say, in looking back on networking, I too was not good at it. And I still struggle with it in large group meetings and things like that. Um, I find it difficult in large rooms to, just try to find maybe one specific person that I might be looking for, things like that. So
Hmm.
networking is still a struggle for me, but I will tell you, I really succeeded in my employment life as the result of networking multiple times. And it really, I think as people with disabilities, I am totally blind myself. And as people with disabilities, no matter what your disability happens to be, I think we sometimes don't want the focus to be on us because very often it's, oh, there's little Susie who has XYZ disability, or oh, get out of her way. She's got a cane, or,
Right.
that guide dog over there smells, you know. So you don't want to be the center of attention, but part of networking is really talking about yourself. And my first real job out of graduate school happened as a result of networking and making a connection with somebody. And, you know, I remember before that happened to me,
Hmm.
thinking when I've heard stories about other people, oh, they were so lucky, but you really do have to go out and explain what your history is like. I, when I was entering the field of social work, I worked at a crisis center and also a drop-in center for gay and lesbian youth. And while I was at a meeting with somebody, she asked me, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I graduated in May, and this was in February of the following year."
Hmm.
And I said to her, I have a master's degree in social work, and this is, where my experience, my undergraduate, my graduate experience has been. And by the time I got home, I had a phone call scheduling an interview. And so it totally was all about networking. And I had brought a copy of my resume with me, and the person that I happened to be meeting with took it upon herself to bring it over to human resources and have a conversation with them about how she, got to know me as a person, and that I really think helped the human resources department to maybe look beyond the fact that I was blind. She did tell them that I was blind.
Hmm.
I told her it was okay. Ironically, a placement specialist from one of the contract agencies had called earlier in the month telling somebody, oh, this person has crisis experience, and she's blind, by the way, and the person not being in human resources and really not knowing about disability laws said, oh, well, then we wouldn't be interested in her. And the
Ouch.
irony is, I really, down the road, several times a year, would wind up interfacing with him while he was above me and he was happened to be in a different department. I never let him know that I knew what he said about me, not knowing me. So it just kind of was always kind of funny when I would have to work with him on things. So yeah, it
Yeah.
is networking is definitely challenging. And I think, if people tell you otherwise, or you say, oh, I have no problems with networking, networking can be stressful on a lot of levels.
But I think also, I mean, certainly you talked about sort of networking through meeting somebody and talking with them about your interests.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, the other sort of formats where we encounter networking can be in conferences. And I wonder if you have any ideas around like how do we prepare for that?
Well, it's interesting that you say that. I think, we like to go into situations and we don't always think of what our needs are. Um, I always say when you're at a conference, you have to think about yourself and your disabilities on your worst day. What supports might you need on your worst day? You're going to be in an environment that you're not familiar with, the setup. You're not familiar with where the restrooms are. You're not familiar with the lighting that you're going to be confronted with. So think about all of those things and how they play into what you may need for accessibility purposes. Also, try to find out in advance, and this is easier now than it was in the past. Very often, conferences have apps that you can connect with and see who are the attendees at the conference. Um, if you know specifically that there are people there who you want to connect with, think about finding out from the conference. Can I bring somebody as a sighted guide to help me orient? If you're deafblind and you're working with an interpreter and you're on a break, ask, one of the interpreters, maybe, can you point me in the direction of so and so? I want to go talk to them. Um, Reaching out and connecting is not a one-way street, and we can struggle with those types of things.
Absolutely. Um, so as you mentioned, um, networking is something that sort of is available and I think people need to use sort of irrespective of where you are in your career, even, as you're thinking of maybe looking for work, as you're considering other, changes even within your particular career. Um, so you talked about networking playing a really great role in your own sort of professional development, Lori, and you shared the story of, the first sort of job. Were there other times in your life when it helped you to maybe like change jobs or get a promotion in
Yeah, well, first of all, networking really was very critical in the job that I did when I was in New York. I've been in Virginia for 6 years now,
Mhm.
but when I was in New York as a social worker, networking was also a way to benefit my clients. So the more I knew about community resources and knew about service options within the community, I was able to help my client. I could pick the phone up and say to a housing worker at the county, this is my client, this is their story, these are the supports they're going to need. But because I took the time to connect with that person at a meeting, they would take the time to meet with me. And I actually have a pretty funny story. I once was with a deaf client and we were standing in the emergency housing department, and it was tight quarters,
Hmm.
and we had not such pleasant person working the case, and she was sitting at her desk, and the sign language interpreter was standing to her right, and the client and her children were sitting across from the desk, and I was standing next to the client, and there really wasn't room for me. So laying in the aisle of these cubicles was my guide dog because there was nowhere else for her to go. And I heard somebody say, "Why is there a dog in here?" And I heard the director of emergency housing go, "Oh, that's Lori's dog. Don't worry about it."
Ah, so they were accustomed to you.
And they were so accustomed to me that it was like, you know, no big deal, you
Right.
know.
Right.
Um, so it really, it does, networking is so essential. And, it's a two-way street. It's give and take. It's not only telling somebody about yourself, but it's also listening to their story. What have they done professionally? The work that I'm doing now with the American Printing House for the Blind Connect Center,
Hmm.
I got as a result of being on their professional advisory committee. They basically said, we have some funding to take on a part-time employee. And I emailed the person and said, like, I am more than happy to resign from the professional advisory committee. Here's my resume.
Right.
So, you know, I know I have trouble talking about myself. It's a real effort. Um, it probably doesn't sound like it tonight though, but
Well,
it 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 really it's putting yourself out there.
yeah. And I think, I mean, the other part of sort of using networking and listening and thinking that the aim is to build a relationship is I really truly think that sort of the more information you have about what a particular field is or what a particular job is that you're interested in, I think the more it helps you to be informed and sort of the more you can sort of target your job search. And I think, and importantly, I think you sort of approach the job market with a little more confidence. And I've always found that, you know, the more you talk to people, the more you learn. And so that might help you to rethink the way you're presenting yourself. Or it may help you to say, you know what, this isn't at all what I thought it was, and I need to think of another sort of way that I can use my skills. Um, and I suppose the other thing, and Lori, you sort of in telling your story of being on the professional advisory group.
Hmm.
I mean, and I don't know if this is true about that position or not, but there is this thing called the hidden job market, right?
Hmm.
And these are the jobs that exist, but for whatever reason, they're not quite posted as yet. Or it could be that based on your skills, your interests, and somebody's sort of interest in you as what you can contribute, people sometimes create positions for you.
Hmm.
Um, and I think networking gives you sort of access to that world in particular. And if you're not doing it, then it's hard for people to know sort of who you are. Um, so it's really important.
Yes, I would agree with you. And the work that I'm doing with APH Connect Center is a result of, that type of, they were looking for a set of skills that I happen to have. My very first job outside of social work, I was doing volunteer work on a suicide crisis hotline. And the job that I interviewed for was working with individuals, families, and individuals that are in various crisis situations. Being in New York, this was shortly after 9/11.
Mhm.
So I did screenings for programs to assist families who had lost a loved one in the Twin Towers. So it was very tough and emotional work. But when I went on that interview, one of the questions they asked me was, tell me about a difficult crisis call that you had to handle and what did you do? And afterwards, the person who was interviewing me said, you were able to sit there and tell me the experience in under 2 minutes. And he said, I could see the emotion on your
Mhm.
face, but you clearly encapsulated everything that was important to the client, but also highlighted your skills. And, I will never forget him saying this to me because honestly, it was an interview and I couldn't tell you what I said to him. But it was volunteer experience. I had done my bachelor's internship with this organization and I chose to stay on afterwards as a volunteer, giving me something to do, showing that it's not just about me. I was willing to stay in the trenches and work within a community.
So I want to say one thing and then we're gonna pause and see if people have any specific questions because what you just said raised a lot of, I think, sort of issues, and not in a bad way, but things to consider as you do networking. One
Hmm.
is around the idea of using volunteering, right, as a way to give back, to sort of use your skills and to acquire new skills. And then the second part is sort of being prepared for times that you either in an interview or that you might meet somebody as a result of making some connection through networking. Um, so let's pause and see if anybody has any questions, and then we'll come back to those two topics, volunteering and being prepared. Does anybody have any questions?
All right. It looks like we have a question from Norma. Norma, you are unmuted. If you could also unmute yourself.
Okay, hi. You can hear me
Huh.
okay?
Yes, hello.
Oh, hi. Thanks so much for this. This is very interesting. Um, when you talk about conferences and conventions, what I most relate to is one of the consumer organizations of the blind that I've attended for a number of years. And I'm wondering about uh, dress as far as when you're going to be networking. Because
Mhm.
generally, when I go to conferences, I kind of I mean, I'm not shorts because hotels are freezing cold, but I'm sure you guys can relate. But I don't necessarily have a business suit or a blazer and slacks with me. So I just wonder if you could talk about that in terms of preparation for a conference or a large gathering, in a kind of a semi-business setting or something.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lori, do you want to answer?
Sure. I think you should always dress a little more professional if you're there for networking purposes. So for example, when I go and work at consumer conventions, I still dress a little more professional than I ordinarily would. I do often think I should be carrying a blanket with me because, yes, those hotels are freezing. That is not professional. But that being said, really, there are places like Dress for Success, which is nationwide.
Hmm.
Sometimes they go by other names, and they can very often get you clothing that would be more on the professional side. Vocational rehabilitation also often can fund a small purchase of a suit or professional wear. Um, and that's again about managing your funds and, depending on what they give you financially, you got to be thrifty.
Right.
Um, so, and, also letting people know there's nothing to be embarrassed about when you say, I don't have something professional to wear. You would be surprised what people have that they want to get rid of. Um, we used to get phone calls all the time when I worked at Catholic Charities of people that had, they're no longer working. They just retired and they have a closet full of suits to give
Mm.
away, men and women. Just let everybody know, like, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. And it's a way of networking.
That is true. That is true. So if I'm hearing you correctly, so I must like when I go to the like consumer conferences in the summer, right? I'm not necessarily presenting and I might dress a little casual. But if I am in a situation, as you said, Lori, where I might be speaking, absolutely dress up for that, meaning
Hmm.
sort of business attire. Um, and there's some flexibility. I mean, I think a nice shirt for guys, a nice shirt, a nice pair of pants, clean shoes. Is that's important. And I think for women, there's a lot of flexibility. Nice slacks,
Hmm.
a nice shirt or a nice blouse. So I think it doesn't always mean you have to wear a suit, but I
No,
think you have to just like make sure that whatever it is you're wearing, that it looks presentable and that it's okay. Um, all right. Any other hands, Elena?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. We have a question from Haley. You are unmuted. If you could also unmute yourself.
Hi, I am currently searching for a job, and I have worked for the Lighthouse. I've done a lot of networking, and I agree that it is a great part to getting a job
Mm,
sometimes for me. But in these jobs that I'm applying for, um, it's entry level social work. I don't have a master's degree as of yet. I have a bachelor degree, and it requires a driver's license and a good driving record, but it's because you're going to individuals'
hmm
homes to
hmm
help them with care. And I believe I could get the job done using, if I needed to use Lyft or paratransit services. But I can't lie and say I have a driver's license or a driving record when I don't. And I don't see a number that I can contact a company. What do you do in that situation? Avoid it altogether or get your job application thrown out because you can't lie and say you have a driver's license and a good driving record when you don't have an active driver's license or a good driving
Right.
record because you've never done it.
right. I mean,
Yeah.
oh, go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Laura. No, I was gonna say, I mean, if an answer is absolutely required, can you just put like NA? Um,
I think that because computers are now doing sorting through these job applications, it would get thrown out at the get-go.
Yeah.
So,
So
and
a lot of times,
I don't like it. I don't
yeah.
like that one bit. And I'm one who tries to communicate with everybody.
Hmm.
When I worked at the Lighthouse, I wrote a note to a guy that worked a shift before me that I knew was deafblind. And I said, hey, can you read this? Can we communicate this way? Because I know a little ASL, but not enough to be on the alphabet. And he gave me a big hug, and I'd always talk to the people who knew I knew a little ASL. I would
Right,
sign to them.
right.
So
so I think it is getting harder and harder when it comes to the question of a driver's license actually appearing on online screening.
Mm,
Um, it, it some states, I think it's California, have eliminated that as a question that they can put on like a preliminary screening tool. Um, I was reading something about that a few weeks ago. The The other thing is learning more about why do they want a driver's license is important. So I will tell you, in a lot of states, if you're going to be working in a setting where you're interfacing with people that are in either group homes or supported housing, you may have evacuation responsibilities, meaning that if it's a group home that's run by your agency, you have to be responsible for evacuating individuals, say if there is a flood or a wildfire or something along those lines. So there are legitimate reasons why they want to know these things. And obviously paratransit probably wouldn't be able to help you in those types of situations and in evacuation
Definitely.
situations. So
Definitely.
I think you do need to be realistic. That being said, there are a lot of jobs out there where flexibility is there. It's just finding a supervisor or hiring manager who's willing to listen to your story and how you have come up with ways to accommodate that aspect of the job.
Right. It's getting in to see that
Hmm.
supervisor that I
Yep.
have a challenge. I've had a
Yeah.
challenge with, but I,
I just finished reading a book, um, and I can't remember the name of it, but they talked about um, in these types of situations, reaching out to the company and finding out who to send your paper resume to directly and making that paper connection
Mm.
okay.
as
I'll keep,
opposed to going through an online
yeah,
screening tool.
I'll try to keep searching.
Yeah,
But thank you for that. Just wanted to see what others have done. Because I'm totally blind. I've never driven and I'm not going to.
right.
But it's been a really big challenge for me.
Hmm.
Even in working with young children, or children that are nonverbal, I've been told I can't do that. And they say I can't do that, but then some people give me a chance.
Right.
Right.
And they're like, "You're doing great." Because I said, "Hey, do we have?" I'm a substitute right now, and I said, do we have any puzzles with letters with the pieces in the shape of letters? I can help see what these kids know as far as their letters go."
Hmm.
Hmm.
And I started interacting with the kids and saying, "Hey, this kid, it does have letter and color recognition. I think that needs to be noted."
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and I love working with these students and the staff members that believe in me. But sometimes I guess the lead teacher will go to the principal and say, "This isn't going to work." Then the principal says, "Oh, this isn't going to work because you can't see. And these kids are violent and they might throw a chair at you." And I said, "Well, can a sighted person anticipate when they're going to throw a chair?" They're like, "No." And I said, "Well, I don't break any easier than anyone else.
Right.
I Can I just please get a chance?" It's it's been a challenge, a really
Yeah.
big challenge. Thank you.
No, I hear you and I commend you for sticking with it and continuing to sort of figure out what your options are. So thank you for speaking up. Right. I don't know. Elena, I don't know if another hand.
There is.
Okay.
Jill, you are unmuted. If you could also unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for letting me ask my question. I'm going back to the clothing question we were discussing,
Hmm.
and I've got a golden lab guide dog who sheds like the dickens. And short of pulling out my my lint licker, as I call it, the big roller, like what is like? Because my instinct sometimes is just to joke about it because there is no way I'm ever going to be hair free with this beautiful girl. And like, have you ever encountered that, Lori? Because I know you said you have a guide dog, and like, do you have any do you have any good tips other than just throwing up your hands and just kind of like laughing and go, eh.
Well, I will tell you, no, I don't have a good solution. I had one golden retriever and the lab that I have now sheds more than that golden ever did. Um, so it it's just part of being a handler. And, maybe lighter colored if you're wearing pants or, if you have a skirt or whatever, uh, a lighter color that might not show the hair as much.
Yeah, I wear a lot of khaki now because of
Mhm,
her.
mhm.
Okay.
And I think particularly for dog hair, it's also what's the material.
Yeah,
Um, Static guard can sometimes help you keep dog hair away, but not
yeah,
always.
gotcha. Thank you.
So maybe we could take one more hand and then we're going to continue because there are a few more things we want to say.
All right. Becky, you are unmuted. If you could also unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. This is kind of an off the wall one. I am also totally blind and I am living in Southwest Minnesota where there is absolutely El Zippo for transportation. It's a royal pain for those of us who like our independence and want to, utilize that. And I've never done any networking. This is the first I've ever heard of it. Um, I don't understand why the Minnesota Services for the Blind never told me anything about it because this is the first I've ever heard of it. And my goal is to find a I'm going to start with part-time. I'm trying to get back into the workforce again. Um, I did medical transcription for a while, then that kind of died out, no thanks to the technology. And so I haven't been working for a while, so now I want to get back into it. And I want to, find a stay-at-home job until I can, get into the real world and get away from Southwest Minnesota. And so I guess my question is, how would I even begin to do any networking and how would I go about it? I mean, I'm not sure. I know I want to stay with like, something I can do at home, like customer service. I'm a people person. And I like to help people. I like to do things. I'm not afraid to talk to people. But I just don't know where to turn. I've had help with services for the blind, but I'm not getting anywhere with it. I mean, I've worked with them for over a year, and I'm pulling my hair out, thinking, "Good grief, I want a job. I'm sick of this."
Mm,
And
mhm.
I don't
Mm.
even know where to begin with networking or anything. I'm kind of, I'm like, okay, where do I go? What do I do?
Well, APH does have something in conjunction with Insight, that's NSITE,
Okay.
and it's called the Job Seekers Toolkit. And our whole course one focuses on networking and building your network and both, thinking about your family and friends as a network to thinking about professional contacts. Are there groups in your area that focus on people who are actively looking for employment? Sometimes better than your vocational rehabilitation are your career one-stop centers, places like that. They're, you know, called basically different types of things depending on
Hmm.
where you are, Department of Labor, things like that. They really have their finger on the pulse of your local community. And I will say that often people in rural areas do well to connect with them because they can tell you up front, these are these are jobs that other people in the area are working at, or here's an employer that hires temp work and has contracts for transcription or, whatever it happens to be. Um, very often when people are using the internet and using big job search websites, a lot of employers put things out there to get resumes in because they pay based on how many resumes they get in to the company so that it stays free for you as the person seeking a job. So really connecting with that local market is very, very important. And I am a big believer of calling up an organization and saying, like, these are my skills. Here's what I have to send. Can I send my resume to your HR department?
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to go back to something you said, Lori, which is um I know it may feel like, what do I do and who do I turn to? And absolutely, sort of, as you think about networking, um, I'm into like being a little more being systematic about it. So starting with like, okay, who do I know? Like, who are my friends? Who are my family? And this can be people in any sort of setting that you know them. Are there people at church who would be willing to
Hmm.
talk to you? Are there people at the library? Just so like sit down, a way to sort of start the process, I think, is you sit down and you write up your list of like, okay, here are the people I know. And then like another list you can put together is like, okay, who do I want to know? Like, here are the people I'd like to know. And sort of using those lists, you can start sort of putting together your own sort of plan for for networking. Um, and Lori, I love that idea. I mean, I'm going to say a little caution here. Um, some of the one-stop centers, I hope they're
I'm
better than they
shaking
used
my
to be.
head and smiling vigorously
Okay, because
because they
yeah.
can be challenging, but they also can be a wealth of resources.
Absolutely. So yeah, so just to say go, absolutely use them because you're a taxpayer and
Hmm.
they're there for us. Um, they're there for everybody in the community. And I think that the other thing that I found like helpful, not only could they tell you about sort of the job market, but they have like what are job clubs, right?
Hmm.
And even though people might be like, I don't know what to do with the blind lady in the job club, um, I I personally went to a job club because they were sharing information that, okay, so maybe they don't know what to do with it, or they couldn't imagine how I, as a blind person, would use it. But I knew how I, as a blind person, was planning to use the information. But I needed the information. So, please take advantage of resources that are available. Your library is another good place
Hmm.
to go and look for information. And the library, I don't know, it may have like accessible computers which you can use. So yeah, take full advantage of all of the community sort of resources that are there.
And
So,
I will share my email address at the end and also give my work email to Cheryl to share with everybody. So feel free to reach out um, to me. I'd be happy to talk with people individually about their situations, but also thinking about what are some volunteer opportunities. So you're building your
yes,
resume
yes.
and thinking about like, I'm going to use this as an example because I actually wrote something a couple days ago and it was an example. Um, Somebody that volunteered in golden retriever rescue.
Mm,
What are the skills they got from volunteering at a rescue? What, they maybe kept a spreadsheet of all the dogs and all the people on the waiting lists, and they worked on matching dogs and people. That's a skill. That's a skill a company would love to have. But working on then highlighting your volunteer work into paid work. Is
right.
there an organization that in your community that might need somebody who can organize something for them, depending on what your skills are? Turning your volunteer work into paid work can happen. You just need to make sure that you don't make it a permanent volunteer job
Oh,
because
that's
you are
perfect.
valued.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. So, yes, thank you, Lori, for bringing that back to one of the topics we wanted to talk about, which is volunteering. I can tell you, Lori and I are avid believers and have ourselves used volunteering as a
Mhm.
chance to be involved in our community, and we absolutely encourage everybody to volunteer. But I think you really, as Lori said, you want to, you want to make sure that like volunteering doesn't become the thing you're doing because it makes you feel good and you're getting a chance to contribute. And, to some extent, whether it's a conscious thing or not, you're sort of using it to like put off the hard thing, right? Which is to keep looking for work.
Mhm.
And also, um, there are lots of agencies that are happy to take you on as a volunteer and may never want to hire you as a full-time or a part-time staff. And so we want to just say, be aware of situations like that.
I know
Don't,
somebody, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were
oh no,
going to go
I'm
ahead.
done. I'm done.
I know somebody that went and worked for a county office for people with disabilities, and he did an internship for 18 months. He was going like 4 days a week. And I'm like, dude, like, wake up. This is not going to turn into a job anytime soon. And he finally woke up and smelled the coffee
Hmm.
and now is actually doing work for Homeland Security. Um, so yeah, it really, but it showed he had work for 18 months. Yes, it was volunteer work because after the Commission for the Blind stopped paying, he continued to go in and work
Wow.
because they were willing to have him.
Right.
But
And
that's not what this is about. It's about still moving forward.
right, right. And I know we're almost out of time, so I'm going to say this. We're gonna send you a handout with some information that we weren't able to cover here. And then a list of some resources. I mean, Lori mentioned the partnership between APH and Insight, so we're going to send that to you so you can have that also. Um, but I think the other thing that your story a while ago brought up was sort of the some of the things you need to do as part of networking, right? So you talked about having a resume ready.
Hmm.
I think, and this is something you need to just sort of do, you practice, be able to answer questions. Like if somebody's like, hey, tell me about yourself. Um, oh my gosh, I used to not understand that question and I tell them everything when that's not what that's not what they're asking. They're really like, tell me about sort of how like where you are and what you're looking for, that type of stuff. And of course, even though we say that networking is not asking people for work, you still need to have an answer. If somebody says, "Well, what do you want to do?" Right? You need
Right.
to say something. Um, so I don't know, Lori, did other things sort of come up for you?
I would say I would always think when my mother would say things like, "Oh, there's a blind lady over there. Let's go talk to her and find out what she does," or
Right,
something like that. I'd be like, "Really, Mom? No."
right,
And, ironically, I knew at a fairly young age that I wanted to go into social work. And lo and behold, like fast forward 10 years, I had met a woman at the medical center and she had a German Shepherd guide dog. And fast forward like 10 years later, I was at a community college. She had just retired from being a social worker for like eons.
mm,
And it was like, it totally came full circle. And she remembered meeting me when I was like 10 years old and was so happy to meet me again. And,
right,
and it really like, and it reminded me like, okay, she did this. I can do it too. And
right,
really find yourself a mentor. Find yourself somebody that can be a support system, that can help you learn the terminology in the industry.
Absolutely. And one of the ways you can do that is certainly through, reaching out to people you know and people you don't know. And I think so as we sort of come to the end, I think one of the things we want to sort of share is, remember that when you do reach out to people, that you're actually asking them a favor.
Mhm.
So, be mindful of their time. If they tell you like I can talk to you for 10 minutes, say thank you and then watch the clock, right? And if it looks like you're going to go over the 10 minutes, you know, ask them like, hey, I know you said 10 minutes. Do you want us, are you available? Or actually, I'm sorry, not so if they say 10 minutes and you're coming close to 10 minutes, I think you just want to ask them if they can continue the conversation or if they would like to reschedule. And it's truly up to them. And I suppose one of the last things I want to say is um, after you've done all this talking with people, it's so important to remember to send a thank you note.
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah. Do you want
I
to say
agree.
more?
I agree. I agree.
Uh,
I thank you notes go a long way, whether it be after an interview, whether it be just an encounter with somebody. It was nice chatting with you today. You taught me about a specific area in my future career, or you let me know about a great resource. Sometimes people don't like their job. I've, I'm fortunate. I can say I never have been in that position, and I have loved every job I've done. And I think it kind of shows. Um, and it, it I would meet with people and they'd sit down and find out what I did. And 85% of the time, nobody would send a thank you note. And I'd often wonder, like, whatever happened to that person, you know?
right,
But I
right,
would never know
right,
because I never heard from them. Once they got what they got, I never heard from them.
right. And the thank you note can be sort of another entree into really building a relationship, right? Because I feel, Lori, like if you had received a thank you note, you would have said something back to the person.
Hmm.
And then if they wanted to contact you in the future, they certainly could have. But yeah. So so networking as a blind person or a deaf person is, we're not going to like sugarcoat it. It is challenging, but it can be done. And that's the important part, that it can be done.
Hmm.
So, alrighty. Well, we're almost out of time. So this was really fantastic. I want to just say thank you so much to Lori for agreeing to be here and being my co-presenter. Also want to say thank you to our ASL interpreters. Couldn't do this without you. So glad you're available. And I also want to say thank you to Elena. Again, couldn't do this without you. So glad you agreed to stay and to help with the webinar. Um, and I also want to say thank you to you because it's so important that you chose to spend your time here. And I hope the information we shared today will be useful for you. Um, and again, just want to say thank you. We have another webinar in December. We're going to be talking about resumes and, look out for that announcement and please come back and join us then. So good night. Good night, everybody.
Oh, I just put my email in the chat and realized it only went to the panelists.
Oh, well, we'll
That's
share
okay.
it. We'll send
That's,
it.
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, we'll send it to everybody.
Thank you. It was
All
great
right.
having
Thank you so
everyone
much,
here.
Lori.
Take care. Yep.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.